Now, 16 U.S. senators have written to the U.S. government asking it to roll out a strategy to stop China from building infrastructural projects in developing countries in the form of loans. They say the initiative amounts to weaponizing capital and described it as a predatory Chinese infrastructure financing. The letter to the U.S. Secretaries of Treasury and State comes at a time when Ghana is signing a $2 billion barter loan facility with Chinese state firm Sino-Hydro. Here's a news desk report.
Quoting the Center for Global Development, the senators led by Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Joe Donnelly of Indiana said Chinese behavior as a creditor has not been subject to the disciplines and standards that other major sovereign and multilateral creditors have adopted collectively, and usually results in rising debt levels in developing countries and dependence on China. The senators expressed worry countries like Djibouti have fallen in such traps, resulting in their debt to GDP ratio increasing from 50 to 85%, the highest for any low-income country, and putting them at risk of losing their major port to China. The senators warned there is an attempt by China to weaponize capital in Africa, Asia, and Europe, saying one of the key tools for doing this has been the China Export-Import Bank. They are asking the U.S. government to provide a plan on how it can use its power as the largest contributor to the International Monetary Fund to prevent the continuation of ongoing such Belt Road Initiative projects in developing countries. They also want a clear plan on how the U.S. government can educate developing countries about the risk of Chinese infrastructure loans and provide alternative funding to them. The senators claim China, through these initiatives, is seeking to create an economic world order ultimately dominated by China, and called on the U.S. government to counter the attempts to hold other countries financially hostage and force ransoms out of them.
Let's get on the line and speak to Dr. Lloyd Amwa. He is head of Center for Asian Studies at the University of Ghana, Legon, for some perspective on this. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Aisha. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Do you share the view by some who say the U.S. is just worried about China's growing influence on the world?
Well, we can't discount that. I mean, no serious, close observer of international politics and international relations and geopolitics would not but realize that the emergence of China has in many ways presented a serious rivalry, for the United States. Take, for example, the U.S. dollar. Why did the U.S. dollar become the currency, or the reserve currency of the world? It did so because of the predominance and the dominance, even if you like, the hegemony of the United States. 1945, after the World War, when the main institutions that we've come to more or less know, like the World Bank, the IMF, the Bretton Woods institution, when all of these were created, and of course the UN, it was the US that was at the center, if you like, of the world. Of course, there was the Soviet Union, but fast forward by the 1990s, after the intense Cold War rivalry, the USSR more or less collapsed. And so for a brief period, the US was the unchallenged, leader of the world, and then we turned to the 2000s, and here we are with a new, country that is making no bones at all about its, vision in terms of wanting to be heard, wanting to be influential, wanting to capture markets, to influence technology and the rest of them. So that rivalry is real for the U.S. It's not in doubt at all.
So, given the volumes of funding Ghana is receiving from China now, do you think we should tread cautiously?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in many ways, any nation's finances ought to be organized in a very systematic way, such that it doesn't lead to unnecessary debt overhang. I mean, that has been the nature of things regarding the economy, at least in neoclassical economics. you know. And so it's logical, it's almost a no-brainer, you know, that we should make sure we do not run into debt. But that particular analysis should not lead to a paralysis, you know, where because of that fear, you know, this great opportunity regarding China's emergence, you know, we would become so overly cautious that we would not take advantage of it, you know. So, in effect, we need to have a balancing act, you know, find the golden mean, you know, in terms of how much we can take relative to how we can manage it so that we can do the things that we ought to do and do that quickly. I mean, in many ways, I think even Ghana is late to the game. The Chinese have become, you know, more stingy. I mean, earlier on, let's say 20 years ago, the Chinese were splashing money, you know. I mean, when I used to live there, I mean, the cost of living was very, very low. You know, China was very, very rich then, you know, a few decades back, you know. Now, there's a bit of a squeeze. And don't forget, China has become like a beautiful maiden. Everyone is, you know, interested, you know. So all the countries of the world, including the U.S. and the European Union and the rest, are interested. You know, so it has changed the dynamics. And so we have to take our chances, you know, clear in our minds that we act in a strategic, tactical, intelligent manner so that we can benefit. Because the Chinese themselves benefited from other countries. The China benefited from Japan. Japan was rich, super rich in the 80s. It had posted, you know, consistently high GDP growth rates, 8% for a long time, you know. And China benefited from that growth. Of course, China was as poor as we were, or even worse at that time. But they managed to balance things out, take the resources they needed from Japan, and make sure they never got into debt. And I tell you this, it is known, and the World Bank has data on this, it is known that the Chinese, whenever they took a debt, would pay on time. They do not ask for a rescheduling, they do not ask for a moratorium, right? And this is what we have not done, and this is what creates the complications and complexity for us in the international system.
You say is the right way to go, to learn how China made it, or to toe the line we're toeing now by taking all these big loans we're taking from China?
No, learn lessons, of course, and not just from China, but from other countries that have managed to turn the corner, you know. So, and the lessons are clear. Those countries that managed to turn the corner were smart with the finances that they got from other countries. They did not spend on consumption. You know, you take the loan and you spend on four-wheel drives and the rest of them, and then you leave the work that has to be done undone, your bridges, your roads, hospitals, and the rest of them. Or you build them and you don't maintain them, so in 2-3 years they are gone, you have to go back for a loan. You know, so these are the soft things, you know, that I have written about, for example, in terms of how we engage China. They are part of the broader strategic, you know, way in which we should engage China. You know, the softer questions of frugality, of you know, cutting our coat, you know, according to the kind of cloth we have and our size, and all of that are things that we ought to do so that we don't waste the money that we. If you take a loan and you spend it on consumption, you know, you don't spend it on the bridges you have to build, etc. Of course, you'll be broke, and then you have to go back for more. You can't even pay the principal, let alone the interest, and then you run around, you scurry around for what? Moratoria, and then you want, you know, rescheduling, and then you want debt cancellation, and that makes you a pariah in the international system. You are not taken as being serious, and then that has repercussions. You know, there's a kind of you know, snowball effect. You know, because if your country is not serious, people don't want to invest, your citizens are not respected, yada, yada, yada. on and on and on. Right?
Well, many thanks to you. Dr. Lloyd Amoah is the head of Center for Asian Studies at the University of Ghana, and he wants us to tread cautiously, and he says that we need to have a balancing act in dealing with the Chinese, and he wants us to be strategic, practical, and intelligent in dealing with the Chinese. We take a break.